She came all the way over from the SEC/Robinson Hall to present. She's a graduate student in the Department of Biology, and she's a really an amazing graduate student. She's been working on fireflies for quite a while now. She came here to work on fireflies. She spent time in Taiwan. She's fluent in Chinese, studying fireflies. And one of the things that's kind of impressive about her work is the way she's looking at basic biology of fireflies, their communication, the effects of light pollution. But then she takes it to really try to connect to, people, to sort of the way we actually make policies, what we can do to sort of alleviate the problems. So this would be sort of basic research meets applied research. What can we do to make a difference? And so she's going to tell us a little bit about her work, and I'm really excited to share her work. I got to see her speak for a short period of time in November, and I think you're in for a real treat. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? That's good. Thank you. That's a very nice introduction. So hi, everybody. My name's Avalon, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about fireflies. So because I have a little bit more time than I did in November, I'm going to make sure that we start with a general understanding of what a firefly is. So what is a firefly, right? You may know them as lightning bugs or glowworms. Well, it turns out they're not flies, they're not worms, and they're not even bugs, technically, because true bugs is an order of insects that doesn't include fireflies. And I thought I would start with some obscure entomology knowledge so I could alienate as many of you as possible. I think it's working. So this is what a firefly looks like up close, for those of you who haven't seen it. They're got those big eyes, pretty cute. Opinions may vary. I think they're pretty cute. And they're actually beetles. You can tell because they have these hardened outer shells of their wings, like a ladybug or a stag beetle. But they're pretty special among beetles and among insects generally, and among actually all terrestrial animals. They're one of the only organisms that can bioluminesce. Terrestrial organisms. It's very common in the ocean, not so common on land. So they can produce flashes of light from this lantern, which they use to do a whole bunch of things that we'll talk about in a second. So that's the first misconception. Fireflies are beetles. Now you all know. You'll remember forever, right? Second misconception, there's more than one type of firefly. People tend to be familiar with, fireflies, something I see in my garden, and it's just this one thing. But they actually come in a bunch of different varieties. There's over 2,000 species across the globe, some of which are really unique and interesting. So we have species like the blue ghost firefly, which is found in the forests of Tennessee, and it has this sort of eerie bluish glow, this long trailing flash, very, very nice. One of my favorites also is the snow firefly. This is found in the high mountains of Taiwan. It only comes out in the winter, and it has this sort of nice whitish coloring, very cool. Again, these nice long trailing flashes. So there are many kinds of fireflies. So when myself and my undergraduate research assistants go out in the field, we'll see a lot of different things. I want to show you some examples. Here is a nice night in the field. You can see these fireflies, these nice single flashes, like fireworks going off all over. This is one species, and it's quite a lot of them just flashing around. There's also some mosquitoes, you can tell, because we're kind of uncomfortable. So that's one spot with one species. Here is another spot. Both of these are in the Boston area. And this, it's a little dark, sorry, but what you should be seeing, what you should be seeing are these sort of long flickering flashes. So this wasn't slowed down or anything. This is in real time. These sort of long romantic flashes. These are produced by a different species, which occupies a different habitat. And then a third one, this is returning to the habitat from the slide before, but we have a different species here too. So now you can see triple flashes. 1, 2, 3. They come in groups of 3, right? 1, 2, 3. So once you start noticing these things, you go out into these field sites, and it's kind of just stunning and also really overwhelming. You can have 10 or more species in a single site, all of them doing their own thing, and you're just sitting there like, oh, it's scary. But, it's also really cool. There's this incredible diversity that most people never notice. So we'll talk more about that going forward. Now, fireflies can look very, oh, sorry, I forgot. Okay, also some videos of fireflies that I haven't seen personally but are very cool. This is the Great Smoky Mountains in Pennsylvania. These are synchronously flashing fireflies. So they come in rounds, and they're going to come around again at the end of this video. They all sort of flash together in groups like that. And then on even more extreme side of things, we have the fireflies of Thailand that sit in trees together and do flashes like this. This is not sped up or anything. This is real time. These sort of Christmas light type flashes. Really crazy stuff. Haven't seen these in person either, but it looks pretty cool. So these flashes can look really amazing, and the beetles themselves can also look really amazing. So these are some pictures taken by my friend Oliver, who did a summer of field research in Hispaniola and found all of these firefly species that had never been described or photographed or anything, and just like this crazy variation in color and shape and all these things. Here in North America, things are maybe a little bit less exciting, so our fireflies tend to look like this. These are the 5 main genera, the genus level groupings of fireflies around here. So we have Photurus, Pyractomina, Photinus, Lucidota, and Elychnia. And you may notice they all look pretty much the same. And I can tell you, within a single genus, they look really, really similar to each other. And that can make it kind of confusing, but there is a reason for it, which a lot of people don't think about. And so here is a third fact about fireflies that you may not know. They are very, very toxic. So a lot of what they do is warning signals sent to other animals telling them, don't eat me because I taste gross. So just like a monarch butterfly has this bright, like orange and black, right? Fireflies will have these bright black, yellow, red, kind of like a snake too, right? You know, these bright warning coloration. And you can tell that they're toxic because other animals will mimic them. So that's pretty crazy. So you get moths that do, these are firefly mimicking moths. This is not a firefly, this is a longhorn beetle, which is doing a really good job of imitating a firefly. He even has a little light organ down here. I think it's really good. Some people think that some cockroaches also do this, although I guess that's a little bit open for interpretation. But it pays to look like a firefly because things don't tend to eat fireflies because they taste really gross. So going back to our, sort of uniform group of fireflies, I want to delve in to each of these genera and just tell you a little bit about them. So we'll start by knocking out the 2 bottom ones, which are arguably less interesting. These are both daytime fireflies. These come out during the day and they don't flash. So basically they're just beetles, but technically fireflies, but they don't really do that interesting flash behavior. They do glow when they're larvae, but that's a whole other story. So these guys, they look like this. This is Lucidota, this is Elychnia. I put in some nice pictures of firefly sex because I'm in the Lewis lab, kind of obligatory. This is stage 1 of mating, by the way. This is stage 2. So we go, the mounting is first and then the butt to butt. But yeah, these are Lucidota and Elychnia. You'll find them on tree trunks if you wander around in the early spring. You can just see them all over the place if you're looking. So that's that, which means now we only have 3 left, Photurus, Pyractomina, and Photinus. So we're going to zoom in to get some nice cute close-ups of these guys and talk about these 3 groups. So we'll start with Photurus. Photurus, some of you may have heard of Photurus before. They're also called femme fatale fireflies. These are fireflies that eat other fireflies. So most fireflies don't eat as adults. They just fly around, they're very nice, they flash, they glow, it's beautiful. These guys are voracious predators. They use their flashes to lure in males of other species and then eat them in a very brutal fashion. Because these guys eat as adults, they're full of calories, and they get really big, and they're really, really fast and mean. So your normal firefly will have a sort of slow wandering flight. If you have one in your hand, it won't fly away very quickly. It's just going to walk around. But these guys are really hard to catch, and when you catch them, they're very good escape artists. They're full of energy. They'll just zip around. So they're pretty easy to identify based on size and speed. Also, their flashes are really bright, and it's like, just think of it as like a firefly on steroids. That's what the Photurus fireflies are. And you can also tell Photurus because they have these sort of hunched shoulders, these kind of mean-looking shoulders, and these long, spidery legs. So these are unique to North America. You won't find predatory fireflies anywhere else, so it's actually really cool that we have them. Next up is Pyractomina. I would consider these to be the more mysterious fireflies. Not a lot is known about them because they tend to fly around in really hard to reach places, like the tops of trees or deep in a marsh or things like this. And so they're a little bit more mysterious, and not a lot of research has been done on them. I will tell you one bit of research, which I find kind of interesting. In one species, the larvae will live on tree trunks, like this. Here's a larva right there, chilling on a tree trunk. And they'll spend their whole life there. They'll pupate on the tree trunk, and then they'll emerge on the tree trunk. Here's a newly emerged adult. You can tell it's fresh because its wings are still white. They haven't turned black yet. And some of these guys have figured out, the guys especially, have figured out, well, if I come out, if I close really early, I can go find a pupa and sit on it. And when it comes out, hopefully it'll be a female, and then we can mate, right? So this is called mate guarding, but they'll mate guard the pupae of other fireflies of their species, which is a little horrific. And also what's interesting is they don't seem to have a way of telling male pupae from female pupae, so their chances are like 50-50, but they'll still do it. And sometimes they'll actually get a pile of males all around one pupae, like kind of waiting. So that's an interesting fact about Pyractomina. Now, finally, we get to Phytinus. I would consider these, again. Let's go back again. Pyractomina, how do you tell a Pyractomina, right? They're recognizable by this ridge on their pronotum. So this is like the little bit covering their head. You can think of it as a hat. And Pyractomina have a ridge down the middle, while these other ones, they're smooth, right? Can you guys see that, the line and everything? So you can tell from the shape of their pronotum. And this is like super obscure, and like, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because now you know more than whoever wrote the Wikipedia article for Pyractomina, because that is a Phytinus firefly, if I've ever seen one. So these guys are not very well studied, is the point I'm trying to make. Phytinus. Okay, here we're at Phytinus. So these are, I would say, the most well-studied North American firefly, probably also the most well-loved by people. And I think that's mostly because they fly around at eye level. So we can see them. So you can catch them and study them more easily. They also are kind of unique in that they have very stereotyped flash patterns. What do I mean by that? Well, these are the species-specific flash patterns produced by patrolling males as a part of courtship. So you can see, these are 5 different species. Each of them have their own thing going for it. So that you saw before, like a triple flash, a flickering single flash, or a long flash. The most common firefly here is called Phytinus pyralis, and it has this cool J-shaped flash, which I will show you a video of right now. So that is going to be your male. He's going to do a little whoop. You see it goes up. He flies around. He does a little upward movement. And so the duration of this flash and the time between flashes, it's pretty constant. And this pattern is also very constant. So you can see he's flying around. And I like this video a lot because you can tell that he's looking for something, right? He's showing off and he's like trying to get a response. So what is he trying to see? He wants to get a response flash. This is another species you're about to see of Phytinus greeni. The male does 2 flashes and the female responds. So generally what happens is the males fly around doing their flash, 1, 2, and then the female is on the ground looking up. When she sees a guy that she likes, she flashes back. And all parts of this are totally stereotyped. So the time between flashes in this species is always the same. The time it takes the female to respond is always the same. The length of each flash is always the same. And so they can use these parameters to tell what species is there, and if it's their species, and if they want to mate. So there's this huge diversity of flash patterns across the evolutionary tree. These are all Phytinus fireflies. And you can see, this is a phylogeny. I show you this just to show, like, you have groups of fireflies that do these flash trains of 3 flashes to 7 or 8 flashes. And then down here you have groups of fireflies that do double flashes. Up here is single flashes. All sorts of stuff. And so this diversity of flash patterns helps to partition the signaling space and prevent interspecific matings. Now, species in the same physical space, like this, I said before, you can often find 10 or so species at a site. So species in the same physical space will also partition themselves in time. So you have crepuscular species, or dusk-active species that come out right at sunset, or maybe a little bit after. And then you have nocturnal species that come out much later, after the first round or two have gone to bed. So thanks in a large part to this really cool research by Abner Lal in the 1980s, we know that these different kinds of fireflies, the dusk-active and the night-active, they have adapted their flashes to their unique light environment. And stick with me because this is really cool. So the first firefly, as we think of them, the first firefly was totally nocturnal. So it came out late at night, and its flashes were green because, you know, it was it evolved from beetles that lived in green places and were really good at seeing green, basically. But the color of this flash doesn't really matter because they're flashing against total darkness, so it could be whatever color they want. Green contrasts really well against night, right? But then time went on, fireflies started getting pushed back earlier and earlier into the evening until you get these dusk-active fireflies. And if you're a green firefly that's active at dusk, all of a sudden you have a bunch of problems because what can you see at dusk? The green of trees, you know, forest environment. And dusk light also tends to be very blue heavy, right? So you're not going to contrast very well against the trees. Because of this, dusk-active fireflies tend to be yellow. So if you actually go out and observe the colors of the flashes you see, this pattern is sort of borne out. The earlier fireflies tend to be yellow to contrast more against the green of trees, and later fireflies tend to be green, which does them very well. So this is based on a model of optimization of signal-to-noise ratio, but I'm not going to get too much into that. I'm going to keep moving, because now I want to talk about, finally, I want to talk about light. Light. This is my chance to get on my soapbox here and say a little bit. Light, you know, it's the source of all life on the planet, right? It's the thing by which animals see, which is like a pretty important thing to do if you're an animal, right? And it's also this signal that has been constant for all of evolutionary time. So when we talk about climate change, right, this is obviously a huge problem, and I don't want to say that it's not, but like at least with climate change, you know, there have been changes in climate in the past, and so animals have somewhat evolved the ability to adjust to changes in climate. Probably not as radical as the changes we're seeing, but all the same, that capacity exists. But the cycle of the sun, you know, the Earth going around the sun, the seasons, day and night, this has been constant for all of evolutionary time. So there is no reason for animals to be able to adapt to a changing light environment when it is always the same, except now it's not. So this is the Bortle scale of light pollution, which starts at black, representing a natural night sky, and goes all the way from slightly light polluted to super duper light polluted. And much of the US is super duper light polluted, and it's only getting more so over time. So looking at this, we can formulate a pretty simple question. How are fireflies going to respond to all of this added light? Well, the first research into this topic has taken a sort of binary approach. So if there's a street lamp and it's on or off, do the fireflies flash or not flash? And this is really interesting because we've learned that white light tends to make fireflies flash less to varying degrees depending on the species. That's just what I'm showing here with all these bar charts. But there's a problem here, right? Because we've just learned that the fireflies you see flying around are males. And males are important to the perpetuation of a species, but are they the most important? Probably not, right? So none of these studies have looked at females, mostly because they're very hard to find. And there's other issues too. I'm going to describe the gaps for you. So we don't know which wavelengths of light are responsible for this behavior. So white light is made up of a bunch of different colors. Do they care about the blue light? Do they care about the green light, the red light, right? And this is important because we know that they care about light environment, or else we wouldn't see these color changes in different species, right? So we don't know what wavelengths of light cause this behavior. We don't know if males might be able to re-optimize their flashes within a new light environment. Can they adapt to this pressure and maintain lines of communication, right? And we don't know what females think about the whole thing or what it means for the perpetuation of these species. I formulated a few hypotheses just based on what we know about nocturnal fireflies being green and crepuscular fireflies being yellow and all that. So these are my predictions. I think it's very possible that male fireflies might evolve more conspicuous flashes, right? So they could become greener to contrast. Oh, sorry. Go back a little bit. The thing about light pollution comes in a bunch of different colors, right? But now I want you to think about being in Boston at night, right? And you walk outside and you like look up. The sky, it usually looks pretty gross. You can't see any stars, and it will have this kind of reddish hue, this sort of red-gray look. Or if you imagine, being in a sort of rural place and looking at a city on the horizon, you'll see this reddish halo, right? So the way that light gets bounced around in the atmosphere makes this thing called sky glow, which is kind of red. So we know that light pollution can be red, some of it. So that leads me to my first prediction. Now that we're back around. So conspicuous flashes. So green flashes could be more conspicuous in a redder light environment, right? Red, green, right? Versus yellow. Makes sense. Also, males might just make their flashes brighter, right? So we know that birds will sing louder in urban areas to compete with the sound of noise pollution. It's pretty reasonable to think fireflies might flash brighter to compete with this background illumination. And they might become longer in duration or more densely packed in time, just basically more flashes per flash pattern or flash patterns per minute, more flashes, more chances to be seen, right? So that's, I would call, the optimistic prediction. And then we have the pessimistic prediction, which is maybe they won't do this, or maybe none of it will be enough to maintain these lines of communication. If the males and females can't talk to each other, they won't be able to find each other, they won't mate, and populations will decline. So I'll go through these really quickly. Can fireflies make their flashes greener? There's been some very interesting research out of the University of Georgia showing that while we used to think that one species of firefly had one color of flash, actually there's a huge diversity across populations. So these are different populations of the same species, Photinus pyralis. So they are capable of microevolution in this way. But as to whether light pollution might be driving some of this variation, still working on that. Talk to me after if you want to hear more. So in the interest of time, I've designed an experiment to test the remaining predictions. That's these three, as well as this one. And this is what I'm going to talk to you about that relates to TIE. So this is the research I carried out this summer with the support of TIE. And I did this experiment on 19 pairs of Photinus obscuralis fireflies. So I'll describe it to you now. Here we are. Hey, there's Photinus obscuralis. I'm sorry I don't have a better photo. They're very cute. So I think they get their name because they're kind of dusky colored. They have this kind of black coloration. And they're just your standard firefly. You find them in marshy areas. We got these from a little marsh in Lincoln, and the Arnold Arboretum has a marsh, which is, I would consider, a very painful marsh. So a lot of this work, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears involved. But anyway, we got 19 pairs of fireflies, and we took them into the lab, and we built this little container. So this is just transparent acrylic with two chambers, a bottom and a top, right? And in the bottom, we would put a female with a couple blades of artificial grass to sit on, and be comfortable. And then we put a male in the top. So these two fireflies, they can see each other, they can communicate, but they can never come together and mate because of this transparent barrier here. Which means that they will engage in a courtship dialogue, is what we call it, for an hour or more, during which time we expose them to 5 colors of overhead light. That's cool white, warm white, blue, amber, and red. We do 2 intensities. So here, from here on, I'll call them dim and bright, dim and bright. And we filmed the whole thing with a very, very light-sensitive camera. We covered the lens with a green filter to sort of highlight the firefly flashes and block out this extra light so we could really zero in on what the fireflies were doing. So here's what it looks like in real life. Let's see if this plays. I think I might have to play it. Oh, yeah. So you're going to see, hopefully a male at the top. He does a triple flash, female responds. Male does a little flash and fly, she responds. He keeps flashing, she keeps responding. This is in the dark. Now we turn on a cool white light. The male flashes, the female's down here. She's not as excited. He flashes, no response again. He's going to try again. And again, no response. Interesting. So, last semester and this semester, I've been working on analyzing this video. It's turned out to be quite a large project. The first step is to take the video and turn it on its side this way, so you get something like this. So you see the male is going to be over here, the female's over here, and we just make it, black and white and all this. And then, through a lot of complicated steps that I will not explain, we use a blob detection algorithm to isolate blobs in the frame. So we'll pull out stuff like this. So you can see we've pulled out this flash here, this junk, that for some reason. And then we use a little bit of clever filtering to zero in on the firefly flashes. And we get something that looks like this. Okay, so on the x-axis here, we have frame numbers. So we've gone through every single frame of these very, very long videos. And for each frame, we've isolated a firefly flash, or the absence thereof, right? And then on the y-axis here, I've plotted the diameter of the flash that we isolated, right? So this is kind of, you can think of it like an EKG, right? It's like flash, 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 flashes over time. And so the height of the peak indicates the intensity of the flash as measured in diameter, right? And so this width here would be flash duration and all of that. And because the males are always on the right and the females are always on the left, we can highlight male flashes, shown here in, I call that lime green, and female flashes, which are shown in this kind of teal color. So I want you guys to notice something right off the bat here, which is that I just said all this stuff about how fireflies are so stereotyped, but actually here we're seeing a bunch of different things. Photinus obscurellus is kind of unique because it has very plastic flash behavior. It's unusual in its genus for this. So the males will usually do 4 or 3 flashes. So we see a bunch of quadruple flashes here, there's a triple flash over here, and then there's one quintuple flash, which I didn't even know they could do until I looked at this video. It's pretty cool. And then the females are sort of known for their double flash response. This is also very unusual among fireflies. So you'll sometimes see a double flash in response, but sometimes they'll just do a single flash. And that's just what they do. Yeah, okay. So I went through 7 of my 19 videos thus far to make these slides. It's kind of time intensive. So this data that you're about to see is very preliminary, but I think it's pretty interesting. So one of the first things I wanted to know was, do their flashes get brighter or longer under different colors of light, right? So here's a nice little bar chart. So on the x-axis here, you have the colors of light that we were exposing them to overhead. And there's 2 intensities of each, dim and bright. And on the y-axis, we have the change in flash intensity compared to this baseline level here, which is the intensity of their flashes in total darkness. So we see that in general, it does seem like their flashes tend to get a little bit brighter, the male flashes that is, under these different colors of illumination, but there are a few exceptions. Yes, so, and then we can also see that brighter flashes tend to be longer in duration. So this is just plotting the duration of each flash, right? And that makes sense, right? Because if you're going to flash, it takes a while to get up there, it takes a while to go back down. So it seems to follow that they would be longer, again, with a few exceptions. So that's all well and good. This next part, I think, is super interesting. I don't know what's going on up there. These are the male, I don't know what to call it, flash dialogue composition. So I'll walk you through this briefly. So like I said, males can do a bunch of different flashes, a bunch of different things. And with my algorithm, I can pull out these different, quintuple flash versus triple flash. So I have the key over here, single, double, triple, quadruple, quintuple. In darkness, the mix is about like this. So it's mostly quadruple flashes, a good percentage of triple flashes, and then some of the others just randomly sprinkled in there. And under these different colors of light, the ratios of these flash types doesn't seem to change all that much, with the possible exception of there being more quintuple flashes under amber light. I want you to remember that because we're going to kind of come back to it in a bit. But in general, the males seem to behave mostly the same under light and in darkness. Now the females, so they're known for their unique double flash that's like so rare among female fireflies. And that makes up about 60% of their flashes in darkness. But it almost completely disappears under any sort of illumination, which is weird because you'd think that would make them less visible instead of more visible, right? So that's kind of the opposite of what I would predict. Okay, we'll keep going. So this next little bit is talking about changes in overall flash number. We can also think of this as courtship success, because if they're talking to each other, it's going well, right? If they're not talking, not so good. So these data were gathered manually by my undergraduate research assistants from the entire set of 19 videos. So this is pretty in its final stage. So we found that our males flashed about 15 times per minute. That's crazy, isn't it? 15 times per minute in darkness, right? And this didn't change. Well, it fell by about half under illumination, and seemingly regardless of color or intensity, right? It seems like it's just like 15 and then, a pretty solid 7. So interesting. Meanwhile, our females responded to our males. This is, we would see when a male flashes and the female responds, right? They responded to our males about 100% of the time in darkness, and this response rate absolutely plummets under any sort of illumination, to the point where we never saw a female respond to a male under bright amber light. So a little bit of speculation here, but it's quite possible that these females, they just can't see the male, right? Because there's a light right there. So either they're totally blinded, or maybe he just doesn't look quite as handsome because he doesn't have that contrast against the background, right? He's too dim, he's like not interested. So that could be what's going on here. And then what's going on here might be the difference between an encouraged male who's happily dialoguing with a female and a discouraged male who's sort of wandering around sadly looking for somebody who likes him. So if we go back to our predictions, we can sort of go through these. Can fireflies make their flashes more conspicuous? Quite possibly. It does seem like they're making them a little bit brighter, a little bit longer, maybe denser in the amber light. Remember, they did quintuple flashes under amber light, so maybe. But the second prediction, will this be enough to ensure, the future of these species? I don't think so. So the extreme sensitivity of females to any sort of overhead lighting is really striking. And I think this failure to communicate should be the focus of future research studies. This work also sheds light on what I would call a long-standing debate in the firefly field, which is what color of flashlight should you bring firefly watching? If you've grown up around here, you may have heard that fireflies can't see blue light. This is a little infographic released by the Boston Museum of Science. You should bring a blue flashlight, firefly watching. In Asia, it's red light. The kids will have red cellophane wrapped around their flashlights to go out. So, which is it, right? Well, looking at our data, we can see that the best color flashlight for firefly watching is darkness by a large margin. But if you have to pick one of these, it should probably be blue or red. It should be very dim, and you might not want to point it down at the ground so much. So, how am I doing on time? Good? All right, more fun. So I want to talk a little bit about another field experiment that we did this summer, which was very fun. It didn't produce super great data. We're going to call it a pilot experiment, but it is really cool, so I'll share it anyway. So our idea was, okay, we've looked at what females think, under these different light environments. What are the males thinking, right? When the male, when his flash rate is really high and then goes really low under light, is it because he cares about the light, or is he only responding to what the females do, right? What's the male choice in all of this? So we designed a choice for our males. So we have two identical female fireflies, alike in dignity, and each one of them is placed in this hula hoop under a flashlight, and one of these flashlights is going to be turned on, and one of them will be off. And these flashlights come in three colors, blue, red, and white. And we want to see which female the male picks. Now, you may have identified a problem here, which is how are you going to get the females to do what you want, right? So instead, we use robots. These are our Firefly imitation female LEDs. So these are two LEDs that are hooked up to the same button. So when we press the button, they flash at the exact same time. And so we did this experiment. I should have put it up here, but this is on a different species. It's called Photinus greeneye. I don't know if you remember, but we saw him way back at the beginning doing his double flash. Because the males do this nice double flash, it's really easy to sit there, watch for the double flash. When you see the second flash, you hit the button, and the female responds, right? So really easy to talk to these guys. This is what it looks like in the field, by the way. Here's our hula hoops, our tripods, and all that. And here's us. This is our research team. Where's Annie? Hey, Annie. Famous. So this is us in the field having a great old time. Man, this is so fun. You hit the button, you can get males from way far away, and they'll just come zooming over, and they're like so excited, and everybody's so excited. And we have nets because we would always make sure to capture males as soon as they entered one of the hoops. So they enter the hoop, we record his choice, we capture him to prevent accidental retesting, as we call it. And then we would mark them with powder and release them at the end of the night. And we marked them with fluorescent powder, which ended up looking really aesthetic. Here's some nice photos of this fluorescent yellow, or orange, yellow, and green powder. Will sort of, so that the next time we come by, if we catch a male and it's all blue, we'll be like, wait a second. Don't use that data point. Oh, the blue ones. So this is all very fun, but we did suffer some technical difficulties. So the data I'm about to show you is very, very preliminary. I think we need a whole other summer doing this to really get at the question. But here's what it looks like. A choice between an illuminated female and a female in darkness. So based on the color of illumination. So we can see that the white light doesn't seem to make a huge difference. This is totally opposite to what we found in the lab. But it kind of makes sense because the intensities of light we were using, it just looked like a little patch of moonlight in the forest, you know, and so it's fairly natural looking. You could think the males wouldn't have a huge problem with it. The red light, they might have had a slight aversion to red light, kind of hard to say, and then a stronger aversion to blue light. And while this is a little confusing, given that they're not supposed to see either of these colors very well, right? I guess it kind of makes sense. You could think, based on what we know about firefly vision, that blue looks really unnatural to them, and red, they can't see as much, but maybe it looks a little unnatural too. This is all conjecture, so I'll wait until next year. Maybe I'll have something more coherent to say, but it's just kind of interesting. So I'm going to segue into a little bit of pontification. I want to talk about, Colin mentioned I'm interested in policy and like turning this research into real world things, right? And I am. Let's talk a little bit about lighting in cities, or lighting in general. You may have noticed that a lot of places are switching from these old-fashioned high-pressure sodium lamps to new, super bright, super blue LEDs. I think the Somerville Community Path just did this. If you go there at night, you'll see like because LED light, it doesn't diffuse the way that other lights do, so you get these like huge patches of super bright white light and the huge patches of dark shadow, and it's like really bizarre. So lots and lots and lots of municipalities are switching over to this kind of light, mostly because LEDs are really energy efficient, so it's very environmentally friendly. And not to put too fine a point on it, but there's actually a really good LED light in the garage of Dowling Hall that has a little plaque under it that says this is like the first LED light installed in Massachusetts. It's a sign of Tufts' commitment to sustainability, and it is really sustainable because it's energy efficient, but I'm telling you, that light will blind you so badly when you're trying to just use the elevator. So I think there's been a little bit of, well-intentioned, maybe some oversight of what we want out of our street lighting, right, or public lights generally. So LEDs, they can be really bad for these reasons I just mentioned. They're not usually shielded very well. They're super bright, way brighter than other lighting types. So if you don't shield them, it's going to be very blinding. And they tend to be very blue heavy, which is for technical reasons. But we know that these blue wavelengths can keep people up at night and cause these negative impacts on wildlife. So you might think that I'm just like super grumpy about this, right? But actually, I think the ongoing transition to LEDs is a super great opportunity to promote informed, animal-friendly lighting practices. Because LEDs, they're usually way too bright and way too blue, but they can be dim and they can come in any color that you want. So I would like to find a type of lighting that is good for humans, that allows people to navigate their environment safely without disrupting local firefly populations. Whether that be in nature reserves, parks, or suburban backyards. And can I keep, am I good? I think I'll, okay, I'll wrap up. Do you guys want to hear about the insect apocalypse or baby fireflies? I think I am going to do the insect apocalypse, sorry everyone. I got some cute videos, but you can ask me after, because I think this is pretty relevant. The insect apocalypse is here. You may have heard it in the news. It's quite the big story these days. There have been a couple of sort of really alarming studies that have come out in these nature reserves in Germany, showing these enormous declines in insect biomass in what was thought to be an undisturbed area. And also, I think most recently, the rainforest of Puerto Rico. They're finding that these insectivorous animals are declining rapidly compared to those that don't eat insects, and also the insect biomass is decreasing a lot. So it's really scary, and a lot of people, I think, are feeling pretty depressed about it, including myself. But I want to talk about this as it relates to fireflies, because the title, oh, here's another, that's nice. There's a little histrionic, it was a good article in the New York Times Magazine, but anyway. So I first became intrigued by this topic from this article that was written in Science, Where Have All the Insects Gone? That had this like lovely firefly spread as the header. I'm like, oh. And the author of the article made a little comment like, oh, we all know that fireflies are disappearing, but what about the less charismatic insects like, flies and gnats and all this stuff? And I was like, well, hold on a second. So do we know that fireflies are disappearing? The title of this talk is, Has Light Pollution Led to Firefly Decline? So one part of this puzzle is, have fireflies declined, right? And the answer is, actually, we don't really know, because we don't have any long-term data sets at all, shockingly enough. I mean, compared to how much people know about butterflies, we know almost nothing about fireflies. There are very few people working on this topic. And those that do aren't keeping like long-term data sets of like geographic distribution or like changes in range, size and all that. So we don't know very much, but we are working on it. So I want to talk a little bit about a Mass Audubon Firefly Watch. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Firefly. I see some nods. This is good. So this is a citizen science or community science program that's been running for over 10 years now. It was started out of the Boston Museum of Science. It has since been moved to the Mass Audubon Firefly Watch. And now what I'm showing here is just images of participation over the years. So it came out of Massachusetts, it spread across the US, flagged a little bit, and then it was recently relaunched this summer with a new website, new host institution, Mass Audubon, and like lots of enthusiasm for really making this thing really fruitful. But even in its time, being run out of the Museum of Science, it was making huge strides in sort of educating people about fireflies. And they did a survey once that produced all of these beautiful quotes, like about how people changed the way they used their farm when they learned about how fireflies use habitat, and all this really inspiring stuff. Thus far, a lot of the data gathered hasn't really gone anywhere because, like I said, there's not very many people researching fireflies, and some of the data was kind of messy. And I did a brief project, which I won't get into, but most recently, this last year, the first paper using Firefly Watch data was published. It's really very mathy. So this was, you can look it up. Sorry I didn't put the journal. I forget what it is now. But basically they were looking at changes in abundance based on people in their same backyard sort of counting fireflies year after year after year. Like, how are these things changing? And they looked at stuff like how soil moisture influences this, all this stuff that is not, you know, super relevant to what I'm talking about right now. What is relevant, though, is that they found that fireflies are increasing. And it's like, oh, I mean, it was a slight increase, but that is what they found. And so there's like all sorts of ways to explain this, but I think the takeaway that I have is we really don't know what's going on. Well, what I do know is that every time I go out and talk to people about what I do, I get questions like this: where have all the fireflies gone? I used to see them when I was a kid. I haven't seen them for years and years. They used to be all over, you know, the parks in Vancouver, you know, and now they're, not Vancouver, Toronto. I heard that recently. But anyway, so you hear this all the time. But, you know, there could be a lot of explanations. So I won't get too into the weeds here, but I just want to say, assuming fireflies are gone, what are some of the reasons this could be, right? So I think the big one is pesticides. People put pesticides in their backyard and then they're like, where are the fireflies? Well, you know, I don't know what you want. And then mowing. So because the females live in the grass, if you mow the grass, you're just going to take out all the females, and they're pretty important for the population. And then streetlights. I do think this has a big effect, as I've talked about just now. So just some food for thought. If you have a backyard and you want to make sure that it's firefly friendly, you know, maybe don't use pesticides, maybe don't mow as much, especially during the summer. You know, leave some mulch, they love that stuff, you know. And be thoughtful about the lights that you use. Just because you don't see it when you go to bed doesn't mean that other things don't see it. And in a lot of cases, I'll just conclude by saying this. So I think, you know, light pollution can be really depressing. It's so widespread and all these things, but it's also a really nice problem to study because, in general, people aren't really mad when you tell them to turn out their lights. They're not like, ah. And people don't, you know, deny light pollution. You don't have light pollution deniers. Like, I don't think it's real, you know, because you can just see it. And the other thing is, it's as simple as turning off your lights. The moment you turn off all the lights in a city, you see the Milky Way instantly. There's no sort of leftover effects. And so it's a problem that's really easy to solve. And I think we do have the tools to do so, and that's very encouraging. So that's where I'll end it. I want to thank all of my funding sources, especially TIE. It's been really great having that support this summer. And I'd like to thank my advisor, Sarah Lewis, my committee members, and the many, many undergraduate research assistants, some of which are in this room. Whoa. And with that, I could take any questions.
Thank you so much. That was so very interesting. I have one quick technical question and one that maybe is more complex, and then just a final thought. The quick technical one is, if maybe you explained it, I just didn't miss it. Feels like a chicken and egg thing for me. The males just start off going and waiting for a female to respond. So they don't need any kind of stimulus to start.
No. So the males often start earlier. They might start like maybe 15 minutes before the females do, flying and flashing and warming up, and then the females will start responding.
So that's why they're always going. They're just always looking.
Oh yeah, they're always looking, yeah.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Thank you. And so the amber light that you mentioned, to me, and then to my totally untrained eyes, that I would imagine that the lights that you said were the old lights are amber, and the new lights are white, and white's not good, but amber was even worse.
Yeah.
Is it that that's slightly different kind of amber?
No, it's not. So this is really, it's one of these things that's so annoying. So for all other insects, blue light is worse. So blue light attracts moths and beetles and other beetles more than like any other form of light. The short wavelengths tend to be really bad. Fireflies, it's a unique case, and I think the reason is, I won't show it. Is that amber looks a lot like a firefly's flash. They look different to us, but to a firefly, they're almost the same, right? Green and amber. So it makes sense that that's the color they would see the best. And it makes sense also that they wouldn't see blue as well because they can block it out. Because they don't need to see blue, they only need to see these sort of longer wavelengths. I don't think anybody has tested specifically like high pressure sodium versus LED at the same intensity. There's so many different things that like characteristics that these lights have that it would be hard to do. But I would venture to say, just looking at this kind of thing. So an amber light, it's actually closer to a warm white than this. This is totally monochromatic amber from an LED. So those high pressure sodium, they have a lot of other junk kind of mixed in there because it's not made with the, because this is just how it is. So I think they would probably be on par with LEDs.
Thank you. And just a quick, like anecdotally, I had the same question wherever all the fireflies gone. I grew up with them. I lived in one part of a town and didn't see them at all. Moved not more than a mile away, but in an area near by a lake, a marshy area that was surrounded by preserved land, and all of a sudden they were all over the place. So is it that they haven't really gone away, they've just moved to more hospitable, less light polluted areas? Is that something you would suspect? That people, we're just not seeing them. They've gone away to us, but they haven't gone away, or do you worry that they've actually gone away?
I think some of the rarer species have probably just entirely gone away. I mean, the basic problem is habitat destruction, right? So if you only live in a marsh and this marsh gets turned into a shopping center, like that's no more firefly for you. So one thing people sometimes say, which I think is kind of funny, is that maybe the reason we don't see fireflies anymore is because nobody goes outside at night. And maybe they're all there. And I think that is maybe kind of true, that we don't spend time in natural areas at night all that much anymore. Because of air conditioning, people don't go out on their porches at night to cool off anymore, and then they don't see them. But I do think that light has this sort of, it'll push them into the shadows. And then if there's a light there and your eyes become light adapted, you're not even going to see the fireflies if they're in the darkness because your eyes are adapted to the light. So I do think they are still there. I don't think it's as dire, maybe, as people think. I know that you can see fireflies at the Alewife Brook Pathway right by the Alewife Tea Station. So they are here, but probably less than they used to be. So it's probably a mix of both.
Thanks for a really fun talk. Really
Thanks.
interesting. As you pointed out, fireflies are like charismatic in themselves and so culturally valuable. But I was wondering if you could expand sort of generally on the effects of light pollution and then specifically on the alleged loss of fireflies on sort of the broader ecosystem in general.
Okay. So light pollution has direct effects on a bunch of other animals. Birds, migrating birds is a huge one. And then moths. I mean, this is really a lot bigger than people think because moths are important pollinators, and so it's like, oh, it's bad. Fireflies are a unique case because they don't provide ecosystem services as we're used to thinking of them, like pollination. So they don't pollinate, you know. Oh, if they would only pollinate, I could have so much grant money. But alas, they do not. So what they do is they eat earthworms and snails. There's one case of people trying to introduce a firefly to Hawaii to take care of an invasive snail. It didn't go very well, I think. But they're predators as larvae. They live in the soil. They might aerate the soil a bit. They eat earthworms and all this sort of thing. So if fireflies, disappeared from the ecosystem, maybe things would keep going. We don't really know. It's a web, right? You take out a piece and you're like, oh, it's probably not a big deal, and then all of a sudden. But I would guess, it wouldn't be a huge deal. However, I think the cultural importance is it can't be stated enough. Not only is it it's valuable, intrinsically valuable as this aesthetic experience, but it's also a good source of tourism revenue. So this is a very big thing in Asia, this idea of firefly tourism and going to firefly watching spots specifically to see these displays. And it's just a huge industry in Taiwan and Thailand and all of these places. And it's starting to spring up around here. There's the Pennsylvania Firefly Festival, which I showed a picture of, and the Great Smoky Mountains have sort of shows. So I think it can be a really good vehicle to get people excited about conserving the night, right? They're probably the most charismatic nocturnal animal that I can think of. Maybe owls also, but come on. So I think we have to think of it that way in terms of how people interact with fireflies, because the ecosystem level stuff, yeah, they don't pollinate.
Thanks, Avalon. Great talk. My question is, given that, from my understanding, there can be maybe two different types of light pollution affecting the fireflies, either these direct lights overhead on the street or the diffuse light pollution in the sky. And so given that each light might be affecting fireflies in different habitats, which one do you think has the most impact on the greatest population of fireflies? Would it be that diffuse light over a marsh, or potentially those lights? And which one might kind of be, like you mentioned, the street lights might be the cool and warm light, but would the amber light be more that diffuse light?
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for clarifying that, first of all. I didn't mention that in the talk, but there is a difference. It's called astronomical light pollution versus ecological light pollution, the light in the sky versus the light on the ground. And there's an interplay between the two, because the light on the ground bounces up and makes the light in the sky. But what you should know is that blue light goes into the sky more and turns red. So it's not that the red light makes more sky glow, it's that the blue light goes down, it bounces up, it gets reflected around, and it turns red. So warm red lights, they don't create as much sky glow just because of the way that light reflects through the atmosphere. So that's one point. This is a really good question. I think, it's so hard to say. So one of the things I'm really interested in looking at now is, how do fireflies move away from light? Can they escape into the shadows, or are they stuck? Fireflies don't move as much as other animals, so it is quite reasonable to think maybe if they end up under a streetlight, they're just kind of there, or maybe they can move away. We don't know yet. We're kind of working on it. The thing about sky glow, though, is it's so diffuse that it's not going to blind them. And what it might end up doing actually is sort of promoting dusk-active fireflies and hurting nocturnal fireflies. So if it's dusk for longer, all the dusk-active ones are going to come out, stay out, and have a good time, and the nocturnal ones might never get a chance to go out because it never gets dark enough. So I think the sky glow will change the balance of species, and I think it's already doing that. I've at least noticed sort of from my own subjective observations that you do see more crepuscular dusk-active fireflies in the city, and that more in rural areas you'll have a mix of both, but in the city it tends to be these crepuscular ones, and they tend to stay out for a long time. So I think the streetlights have a greater chance of just stopping mating, and then the sky glow has a greater chance of just shifting what firefly populations exist. Does that make sense?
We should probably stop there. Let's thank her once again for enlightening us.
And if you're in ENV 05, we're actually going to meet in this room in the back here, so just go straight back to that room.